When my son stopped calling, I told myself he must be busy. That's what mothers always say, don't we? We find reasons to protect our hearts, even when the silence hurts more than words ever could. The last time he called me, his voice sounded tired. He said, "Ami, I'll call you tomorrow." That tomorrow never came. At first, I waited patiently. I told myself he'd remember. He had a good heart. How could he forget his own mother? But days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And before I realized it, 18 years had passed. 18 years of waiting by the phone. 18 years of hearing other people's children visit their parents while my house stayed quiet. 18 years of pretending everything was fine when people asked, "How's your son doing?" I always smiled and said, "He's doing well." But deep inside, I was breaking, piece by piece. I used to sit by the window every evening, watching the road that led to my house. Every car that passed made my heart skip a beat. Sometimes I'd even step outside, thinking maybe this time he'd surprise me. But it was never him. The house grew quieter as the years went by. His room stayed exactly the same, his books, his old cricket bat, the small photo of him smiling with missing teeth. I couldn't bring myself to move anything. It felt like if I did, I'd be accepting that he wasn't coming back. People told me to move on. Children have their own lives now, they said. But how does a mother move on from her child? Motherhood doesn't have a switch you can turn off. Even when they stop calling, your heart keeps whispering their name in every prayer. I wasn't angry, just lost. I didn't know if I'd done something wrong or if life had simply pulled him too far away from me. And then one day, after 18 long, silent years, I received a letter with his name on it. That was the day I finally learned why my son stopped calling. My name is Safia. I live in a small town where everyone knows everyone. The streets are lined with old trees, and time seems to move a little slower here. Sometimes it feels like the world forgot this place, but I didn't mind. Because this was where my whole world once lived. My son, Ahmed. Ahmed was my only child. His father passed away when he was just 12. After that, it was just the two of us. A mother and son learning how to survive in a world that felt suddenly too quiet. I worked as a tailor from home. My small sewing machine sat by the window, and every time its needle moved, I'd look up and see Ahmed studying at the table. He'd pretend not to notice me watching, but every now and then he'd smile. That same crooked little smile that could melt away all my tiredness. He was a good boy, always polite, always gentle. He'd bring me tea while I worked and tell me about his day. The teacher who praised him, the friend who shared his lunch, the small victories only a mother remembers. I still remember the sound of his laughter echoing through the house. Sometimes I can almost hear it again. A sound so pure, so full of life. When Ahmed got a scholarship to study in the city, I felt both proud and afraid. He was growing up, stepping into a world much bigger than ours. The night before he left, he said, "Ami, I'll call you every day, I promise." And he did, for a while. He would tell me about his classes, the crowded buses, the smell of the city rain. I could hear excitement in his voice. And I'd just listen, smiling quietly, feeling grateful that he hadn't forgotten me. Then one day he told me he had met someone. Her name was Sarah. He said she was kind, educated, and came from a good family. I was happy for him, truly. Every mother dreams of seeing her child build a home, find love, and live peacefully. When he brought her home for the first time, I welcomed her with open arms. She was quiet, polite, maybe too polite. There was a distance in her eyes I couldn't explain, but I ignored it. I made her favorite food, gave her my old gold bangles as a blessing, and told her, "You've brought happiness into my son's life." That day, Ahmed smiled in a way I hadn't seen in years. And I thought, maybe my little boy was finally happy. After Ahmed and Sarah got married, life felt different. Not suddenly, but in small, quiet ways that only a mother notices. At first, the calls became shorter, then they came less often, and soon, they stopped altogether. Whenever I called him, he'd answer politely, but there was a rush in his voice, as if he was always about to hang up. "Ami, I'll call you later," he'd say. Or, "We're on our way somewhere, I'll talk tomorrow." And I always said, "Okay, beta," because I didn't want to be a burden, but in my heart something began to ache, a kind of emptiness that doesn't make noise but never leaves you alone. One evening, I decided to surprise them. I had made his favorite dish, biryani, just the way he liked it, spicy and full of flavor. I packed it neatly in my old tin box and took the early bus to the city. It was a long ride, almost 5 hours, but every mile felt lighter because I was going to see my son. When I reached their building, I stood outside their door, straightened my dupatta, and knocked softly. Sarah opened the door. Her face showed surprise, not the happy kind, but the uncomfortable kind. "Oh, Auntie, you didn't tell us you were coming," she said with a tight smile. I smiled back. "I wanted to surprise Ahmed. Is he home?" She hesitated for a moment, then called out, "Ahmed, your mother's here." When he appeared, my heart stopped for a second. He looked the same yet different, older, quieter, with tired eyes. "Ami, you should have called," he said. There was no hug, no warmth, just words. I stepped inside, holding the tin of biryani. Their home was beautiful. Modern furniture, soft lights, everything in perfect order. But I felt out of place, like a guest who had come without an invitation. We sat in the living room. Sarah poured tea, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. I tried to fill the silence with small talk, but every question I asked felt like an interruption. Finally, I opened the tin and said, "I made biryani, your favorite." Ahmed looked at it for a moment, then said softly, "Sarah doesn't eat spicy food anymore." Something inside me sank. I closed the lid slowly and said, "It's okay, beta. I'll take it back." The tea grew cold. The air felt heavy. I looked around their home, searching for even one photo of our family, but there was none. Before leaving, I said quietly, "You look happy, Ahmed. That's all I ever wanted." He nodded, but his eyes didn't meet mine. That night, on the bus back home, I held the tin box close to me. The smell of biryani had faded, but the memory of his silence stayed sharp. It was then I realized, a mother's love can fill a home, but sometimes a home no longer has room for her love. Days turned into months. He didn't call, neither did I. I waited, of course. Every morning I'd glance at the phone on the shelf, half expecting it to ring. Every evening I'd whisper his name in my prayers, but the silence became a part of my life. Neighbors would ask, "Has Ahmed visited lately?" I'd smile and say, "He's busy. You know how life is." But when the lights went out and the world went quiet, I'd sit in his old room, still untouched, and let my heart speak what my lips never could. Sometimes I wondered if I had done something wrong. Maybe I was too protective. Maybe I said something to offend his wife. The questions kept me awake at night, and the silence, the endless silence, was louder than any argument could ever be. I learned to live with it, slowly. I started spending more time sewing, cooking for neighbors, visiting the market. On the outside, I was fine. But inside, I was still that same mother sitting by the phone, waiting for her son's voice. And though I didn't know it then, a letter, a simple piece of paper, would soon change everything I thought I knew. 18 years had passed since I last heard my son's voice. Then one morning, a letter arrived. Old, wrinkled, and slightly torn. But when I saw his handwriting, my heart stopped. It was Ahmed's. I sat down slowly, holding it with trembling hands. For a long time, I couldn't open it. Then I took a deep breath and unfolded the paper. "Ami, I know you must have thought I forgot you, but I never did. I just didn't have the courage to call." My eyes blurred as I read on. After our first year of marriage, Sarah fell seriously ill. She didn't want you to know. She said she didn't want to worry you. I wanted to tell you so many times, but every time I picked up the phone, I broke down. I didn't want you to hear me cry. My heart ached as his words unfolded. When you visited that day, she had just come home from the hospital. She wasn't being rude, she was just in pain. And I was scared, ashamed, and lost. That's why I said you should have called first. I didn't want you to see how broken we were. Tears rolled down my cheeks. All these years, I had thought he had forgotten me, but he had been fighting a battle I never knew about. He went on to say, "When she passed away, I couldn't talk to anyone. I left everything behind. I thought I didn't deserve your forgiveness." And then the line that shattered me completely. "I kept your number in my wallet and looked at it every night. I wanted to come home, but I didn't know if you would still open the door." I pressed the letter to my chest and whispered through my tears, "My door was always open, my son, always." For 18 years, I had waited for an explanation, and now with a single letter, all my anger melted away. He hadn't forgotten me, he had just been trying to protect me. I folded the letter gently and placed it beside his old photo. The candlelight flickered, and for the first time in years, I felt peace, not because I stopped missing him, but because I finally understood him. For days after reading the letter, I couldn't think of anything else. I kept it on my bedside table, right next to the lamp. Every morning, I'd unfold it carefully and read it again, and each time, the words touched me in a different way. Sometimes I cried, sometimes I smiled through the tears, but every time my heart grew a little lighter. It was as if that piece of paper had carried all the answers I had searched for these 18 long years. All the questions that had lived in the quiet corners of my heart finally found their peace. I began to understand something I hadn't before. Sometimes silence doesn't mean neglect. Sometimes people disappear not because they stop loving us, but because they don't know how to face their pain. For all those years, I had told myself that my son had forgotten me. But the truth was, he remembered me every night. He carried my number in his wallet like a prayer he couldn't say out loud. That realization broke me, and healed me at the same time. That evening, I went into his old room. It looked almost the same. His books still lined the shelf, his school trophy still shining faintly under a thin layer of dust. The air smelled like memories, warm, faded, and familiar. I sat on the edge of his bed and looked out the window, the same one where he used to sit and watch the rain as a boy. I could almost hear his laughter echoing through the walls. I closed my eyes and whispered softly, "Ahmed, I forgive you. You were hurting, and I didn't know. But I know now." The words felt like a release, gentle, peaceful. It wasn't a loud cry or an angry outburst. It was a quiet acceptance, the kind that comes when love finally wins over pain. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in years. No more waiting for the phone to ring. No more replaying old moments in my mind. Just stillness and gratitude that I had known love, even if it came back to me in the form of a letter. In the days that followed, I began to live differently. I started walking to the park again, talking to the flower seller near the gate, and smiling at the children who played on the street. Life hadn't changed much from the outside, but inside, everything felt softer, lighter. My neighbors noticed it too. "You look peaceful these days," one of them said. I just smiled and replied, "Peace comes when you stop holding on to hurt." Sometimes in the evenings, I would light a candle beside Ahmed's photo. Next to it, I framed his letter, not as a memory of sadness, but as a symbol of love that refused to die. I would sit by the window with my cup of tea, watch the sun set behind the trees, and feel him close, not in distance, but in spirit. Forgiveness didn't mean I forgot the years of silence. It simply meant I chose not to let them define my love anymore. One afternoon, I decided to visit the old post office. I took a sheet of paper and wrote a short letter, addressed to my son's old home, even though I knew he was gone. It said, "My dear Ahmed, I read your letter every day. You gave me back my peace, my sleep, and my smile. Wherever you are, I want you to know. You were never forgotten. A mother's heart never closes its doors." I sealed it gently and handed it to the clerk, who looked at me curiously and asked, "Should I send it registered?" I smiled and said, "No need. He'll receive it in his own way." When I stepped outside, the sun was warm on my face. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. Maybe he wasn't here to call me Ami again, but I could feel him in every kind breeze, in every flicker of candlelight, in every prayer that left my lips. And I realized love doesn't end when life changes. It simply finds a quieter place to live. It's been many years since that letter arrived. Sometimes I still sit by the window at dusk and watch the sky turn golden. That's when I feel him the most, my Ahmed. Not as the boy who left, but as the son who finally came back through his words. People often ask me, "How did you forgive so easily?" I tell them forgiveness isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about choosing love over bitterness. It's about freeing your own heart from the weight of what could have been. For years, I lived in silence, a mother waiting, a heart breaking slowly. But now I understand. Love doesn't disappear when someone walks away. It stays quietly, waiting for the right time to be seen again. Sometimes that time comes too late. Sometimes it comes in a letter, or a memory, or a dream that feels almost real. But it comes. And when it does, it heals everything. Every night I still whisper a short prayer for him, not asking for anything, just thanking God that I got to be his mother, even if our story was filled with pauses and distance. Because the truth is, love doesn't always need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. When I look back now, I don't see the years of waiting as wasted. I see them as chapters, quiet, painful, but meaningful. They taught me patience, strength, and faith in the unseen. There's something sacred about a mother's love. No matter how far her children go, a part of her heart walks beside them, unseen, unheard, but always there. So if you're listening to this story tonight, and you have someone you haven't called in a while, someone waiting for your voice, don't wait too long. Sometimes one small call, one "I miss you," one "I'm sorry," can change a lifetime of silence. Because in the end, it's not the words we said that matter most. It's the love we left unspoken. Soft piano swells gently, then fades into silence. And that's what I learned after all these years. Forgiveness doesn't bring the past back, but it makes the heart whole again. And in that quiet wholeness, I finally found peace.